was a movie called Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures with Keanu Reeves, like 70 years ago. And it was like one of those, like, I've never seen the whole movie. I've seen parts of it. I should go back and watch it. But there was a song on one of the, I don't know if it was Bill and Ted's Bogus Adventures Part 2, but a song called God Gave Rock and Roll to You by Kiss. And it's a horrible song, so I figured I'd call this episode God Gave Rock and Roll to You. Just so you know, I didn't come up with it myself. Anyway, so just thinking about hearing Ozzy Osbourne died, and you know, Hulk Hogan. I was never into Black Sabbath. I was never into Ozzy. You know, I liked a couple of his songs like Crazy Train and, you know, like My Mom Coming Home, I think is a pretty ripping song. I didn't know that the guy, Lemmy from Motorhead, helped write that. But anyways, just looking back at all of these years that, you know, coming from when I was a kid, I remember like Kiss being on TV, and I was young, you know, like 5, 6 years old, and they scared the fuck out of me, especially Gene Simmons, you know. But I always remembered as a young kid, from like the time I figured out what a guitar was and what it did, the song Revolution by the Beatles. There's a part of the song where it starts and it sounds like a Chuck Berry lick, which it pretty much is, you know, that like, I remember hearing that. The tone for that guitar sounded dirty and aggressive and just crazy to me. And, you know, I was like a little kid sitting in this seat looking up at my dad. You know, I'm like, you know, a young kid, you know, like he's dropping me off for school in like 1st or 2nd grade, and asking him, Dad, what kind of guitar is that? I want to play the guitar like that. And, you know, parents are probably like, yeah, good luck, bud. You know, stick with baseball or whatever, you know. But I just remember as the years went by, you know, I got a guitar lesson from a guy downtown, and he had this big boring fucking guitar, and he had a suit on, and he was just a fucking total nerd. Hell of a guitar player. His name was Ralph Fava. He was an awesome guitar player, but he was very, you know, like, by the book. And I was like, I seen his, first off, I had an acoustic guitar. I didn't want an acoustic. I knew that already from by the time I was like in 2nd or 3rd grade. I knew that guitar wasn't the one I wanted. I wanted one you plugged in. I didn't know how the noises went from this to this or whatever, but I just knew what I wanted. And I remember he showing me on this shit guitar. I'm like, this isn't, you know, I just remember being in Mr. Tarazic's class, and going, this isn't what I want to do. I've had, like, you know, and you're young, you know, you're in, like, you know, whatever grade, you're, you know, I'm not even in, I don't even think I was past 4th grade, telling this teacher who plays the guitar very well, yeah, I don't want to do it like this. I want to play, like, da 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 da.
In 2 miles, use any lane to take the I-4 West exit toward Tampa.
He just looked at me and said, well, this is how you learn. And I'm like, yeah. And my dad was so pissed because he spent $80, and he never let me forget. You know, he was such an asshole. Instead of like asking your kid, like, well, what are you trying to, you know, what are you trying to, no encouragement. It was like, you're never gonna learn how to play the guitar. I just wasted fucking $80, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, you know, probably like how his dad was to him, you know what I mean? Whatever. Fast forward. You gotta remember, you don't know if you're a millennial or if you're young or youngish, if you were born after or during the 90s. We went from like prehistoric fucking times, basically, like Blockbuster, renting the Ultimate Fighter on television, to like, there was nothing really other than old rock and roll, like, you know, like Buddy Holly and the Ramones and shit like that. Really, you know, the Who, Baba O'Reilly.
Use any lane to
that
take
one
the
song
I-4
that
West
goes
exit toward Tampa.
down, down, down. remember hearing that guitar like that and going, dude, that's it. You know what I mean? That's it. What are we doing? You know? But as a kid, everybody looked at me like, concentrate on just learning Mary Had a Little Lamb and learn. Even to this day, I barely know the names of the strings. I feel so great when I put all the strings on, right? And they don't break. But I just remember one day, you know, my mom wasn't about cable. My dad had moved out, and I was sitting in my grandma's house. My grandma had MTV and HBO and all the channels. My mom, even at that age, wouldn't let me watch. And I just remember being like, I remember a kid, Joseph Villela, showed me the Nirvana CD. He's like, these guys are awesome. And I'm just like acting like I knew what he was talking about. Didn't think much of it. 2 weeks later, I'm at my grandma's. The video for Smells Like Teen Spirit. It was like when people say they know where they were when Kennedy was shot or when they pretended to go to the moon. I remember sitting in front of the TV on my belly with my little brother, and we're sitting there watching TV like a bunch of nerds. You know, my grandma's reading the Enquirer or whatever she's doing, right? And Smells Like Teen Spirit came on, and it was like the first time you kissed a girl. You know what I mean? Like, it just was fucking, there's not even really, I would just say it sounds gay. It was the most inspired thing at that point in my life that happened, and I've just been so disappointed since then. You know, now I see people with a Nirvana shirt on, and I have to stop myself from going, I see Nirvana in concert. One, no one's gonna believe you. Two, you sound like that old fucking geezer. Because whenever I say anything about it, like real Nirvana fans will say, what song did they open with? What was it like? Who did they play with? Where did you see him at? How much was it? Very rarely ask any questions. I remember my brother was schizophrenic, and he went to the show with his friends. And I remember years later, you know, he was sick for a long time, you know, and he had delusional thoughts, and he would hear voices, and he was trying to tell me. At the end of the show, Kurt was waving for the crowd to come up on stage. My brother said, I thought he was telling me to come up on stage and play the fucking drums. And you know, we had a laugh about that because he ended up getting stabilized on medication. And anyways, this video ain't about that, but you know, just hearing Ozzy, I'm sure some people felt like that about Ozzy. I didn't. I mean, I don't wish ill on the guy, but he was, you know, one of these people that was just in the right place at the right time, you know, and more power to him. I mean, he definitely had a hand. I mean, listen, Black Sabbath, you know, the guitar player, the whole band. I never owned a Black Sabbath record. I couldn't tell you what order they're in or whatever. I know the song Paranoid and, you know, War Pigs and a couple, you know, Sweet Leaf, a couple, you know, barely know them, you know, but I know like the ones on the radio. You know, they made a fucking genre of music, you know, and that was, they were, you know, in reverse order, Nirvana for their time, you know, or the Beatles. So, you know, it kind of sucks to hear that somebody, you know, because as I get older, you know, I grew up and all these people were alive, so it's like you just think we're all gonna live, and you know, I don't know, it's just like I do, obviously I feel bad for his wife and his family and, you know, whatever, you know, but when you think about, like, you know, I like music, I like art, I like, you know, I would like to find people to jam with and whatever, but, you know, nothing serious, just as that outlet. But when I look at everything, things are so dumbed the fuck down, you know, like things are so just, everything is just so goofy, you know, would be the best word I could use to describe. Let's get this fucking show on the road here. You know, I don't know, it's just hard to it's hard to hear something, and I've got music on my. I think the last band I've heard that got me excited, or the guy had a killer Kurt Cobain type of voice, and they had really good melodic, catchy songs, was a band called the Sheila Divine, and their song "Criminal." The guy just has an awesome. He has, like, without sounding like one of these doofuses like Puddle of Mudd or Creed or whatever, these fucking horrible bands that, you know, I could spot them a million miles away sound like, but that was probably one of the last bands that I was like, yeah, this guy writes some good fucking, you know, I look at the whole thing like, if you're a comedian and you use like other comics or writers and you pay them to write, you're not a comedian. You know what I mean? No more than Beyonce's a fucking songwriter, you know? So for me, I just look at, you know, all of that. What does it have to do with Ozzy dying? I have no fucking clue. I've been out in the sun all day.